Hello, my name is Kaylee Kunzler, and I'm going to be doing a presentation today about the health concerns of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery. It is happening all over the world. It is happening around us, and it is a really big social issue. There are many people that are forced into both sex and labor trafficking. Sex trafficking is when they're forced into prostitution, escort services, or pornography, and labor trafficking may occur in sweatshops, factory work, and domestic work, and any agricultural work across the country. Here's some of the numbers that there are regarding human trafficking. I don't want to get too caught up in these because human trafficking is a very, very underreported crime. I found a bunch of different numbers regarding internationally how many people are actually involved in this. It's really hard to get a number because it's really hard to track and it's really hard to enforce it with the law because people move around with this. And so this information came from the National Human Trafficking Hotline website. They use Polaris to get some of their numbers. This is just the cases that were reported in 2018. So obviously there's a lot more that is going on and not being reported. I currently live in Pennsylvania with my husband coming out here for school. So I did a lot of my work and research about locally in Pennsylvania, but I also put on some stats there in Utah. And this map is what I want to point out about this slide. You can see that it is a lot more prevalent on the East Coast where we are, which is kind of why I chose this topic because Pennsylvania is the 11th highest state for human trafficking. And I guess it makes sense that that's happening on the East Coast because there's more people. So there are many social determinants of health and causes that go into human trafficking. Some of these victims are lacking safe housing, a place to call home. They may not have jobs, money, access to some healthcare services or social support. They find themselves in poverty, and that is one of the major causes of human trafficking, is that these traffickers prey on the most vulnerable people in our communities and populations. These traffickers are really good at identifying these victims' vulnerabilities, whatever they may be, and then using those to create a dependency on them, meaning they don't have a job, they promise money, they bring them to America for a job and then take their visa away so they're stuck. Or it's people in a really bad home situation that start talking to somebody on the internet and feel that connection. So whatever their need is, these traffickers are really good at leveraging that and getting them in with them by initially fulfilling that need. So these people that are at risk for human trafficking are those without a support system. Could be foster kids, victims of domestic violence, anyone coming from an unstable home life, people without jobs. They already have a history of trauma. They're already addicted to substances. Homeless individuals, recent migration or relocation to a new area, or pretty much anybody that is isolated from the community is going to be an easy target for this. So in these situations, then they all look a little bit different, especially depending on what kind of trafficking we're talking about. The traffickers may provide the basic need for function. They have a place to live. They may feed them. They may give them clothes. But other than that, these people are not getting their love, their belonging, their self-actualization. And as I was reading and researching more about this, I feel like these people are in survival mode because they are just living for their next fix of a drug or their next meal, and then they end up working and their trafficker will end up not paying them, and so they don't even have access to their own money that they are working for. So really, none of their needs are being met except for maybe just the very basic, just to keep them alive, because they're just commodities at this point. They become trapped and they fear for leaving for many reasons, including trauma, shame. They become emotionally attached to what's going on, and they may receive threats to themselves or to their family, or they may just become addicted to drugs, which is really common, and it's a really sad issue involved in all this. So they stay just because that's where they know they're going to get their drugs. But the numbers that I saw were just ridiculous of people, and the amount of, especially in sex trafficking, that how many people and rapes that are, committed to meet their quota over one night. It's so sad. There's this quote that I came across that I thought was really, really meaningful from a Time magazine article. It says the first question is, well, why didn't you just run? It's the dumbest question you can ask a survivor, because believe me, they probably asked themselves that a million times. No Block, she's the one who's sharing her experience about this, stayed partly because of threats her captors made against her children. Trackers use many tactics to destabilize their victims, from sleep deprivation to starvation, violence, and drug addiction. They disorient victims by alternating demonstrations of love with violence or neglect. In psychology, this is called a trauma bond. The point is to take away any sense of free will. All you know is what they tell you, says No Block. There is nowhere to turn. There is no one to cry to, no one to ask for help. So I thought this kind of showed how her needs, even that, she was getting sleep deprived and all that stuff too. So even then, some of her basic needs weren't getting met. So some diseases that can be involved in this, and some things that you look for, especially in the ER, a lot of nurses, that's where they may see a lot of these victims. It says they often present with common health issues that may include sudden illnesses, drug overdose, toxic exposures, pregnancy, abortion, or untreated chronic disease such as diabetes. They may report an unusually high number of sex partners. They're involved in high-risk behaviors, and they have a high number of STIs. They may be pregnant, report multiple abortions. They have malnutrition or dental complications. X-rays could show old fractures, or they're coming in with frequent UTIs. So obviously there's some self-harm, and it's hard to care for yourself in a situation where your agency is revoked. Some mental health issues will be present, as well as physical health, poor hygiene, malnourishment, signs of abuse, mental and physical. So there's a risk for harm to others, or by others and to others. So obviously, these traffickers are using force, fraud, coercion. This could be rape, beatings, drugs, false offers of employment, a better life, physical abuse or psychological abuse, debt bondage, all that stuff. Obviously, that is harm to these victims. And sometimes I even read of cases where these victims are then forced to go out and recruit other girls to be involved in this, because if the more girls you recruit, you're promised a better life, or you kind of like move up on your status, and so they'll do that for just their own self-preservation, which is really sad. So what can be done? Obviously, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, I got a lot of information from there. That's really helpful. There's a lot of local help, at least in Pennsylvania. I found a really helpful website that offers housing and safety planning and assistance to these victims. If you come across it in your hospital, you can call a social worker. They will know what to do. And you can attempt to speak with these victims alone if you can, if you feel like there's something fishy going on. I'm not going to go through these questions, but these are some common screening questions that I thought were very helpful that you can look over. It could be uncomfortable at first to learn to talk to these victims, but these might just be places that you can start if you feel like there's something going on that does not feel right. And I think you can just follow your gut with these situations. And here are my references.